Thanks for being here. I've met each one of you very briefly. Hello, John Wukovits.
Let me introduce you real quick.
Oh, that's right. You've got to do your stuff.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dave Lamb. I'm one of the organizers for the library. Welcome to Grosse Pointe Public Library. Thank you for coming out tonight. Tonight we have John Wukovits, who's going to be speaking. John is a retired middle school teacher, military expert specializing in the Pacific Theater of World War II. He's the author of many books, including Tin Can Titans, Hell from the Heavens, The Crew and Country, 1 Square Mile of Hell, and Pacific Alamo. He's also written numerous articles for such publications as World War II History, Naval History, and World War II. And he lives here in Michigan. His books are for sale, as I'm sure most of you know by now. So, welcome, John.
Thank you, David. It's great to be here, and I've already been talking to all of you people anyway, so it's like I know this crowd. But I enjoyed being here tonight. I'm going to be talking about this book here, obviously Dogfight over Tokyo, the story of the last 4 American military to die in World War II. And those are the pictures of the 4. I'm focusing on these, whoops, this one, Fred Hobbs and Eugene Vandenberg tonight. Now, first of all, a little bit of background. I started out after attending University of Notre Dame to get my degree in history, and then Michigan State for my master's in American history. I started teaching in Trenton, and here's a picture of me in my first year. Mommy, they're laughing at me again. Yeah, 1968. You love the fashions, right? Glasses, long sideburns, wide tie with the knots. Maybe some of you remember how it was almost choking you. I think I should have made some money off it, because not long afterwards that movie came out, and Revenge of the Nerds, and I don't know. Strange coincidence or not? Anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed teaching. I taught for 30 years in Trenton, started at a couple Catholic schools, and then moved to the public school system of Trenton, Michigan. Midway through my teaching, I turned to writing, and my writing eventually ended up in the books you see here. These are 12 of them. The 13th was on the first screen. All about the World War II, mostly the Pacific Theater. I've always been grabbed by that. Obviously, Eisenhower was a brief biography of someone in Europe, but that was done for a series by General Wesley Clark, who wanted us, when we wrote those books, to point out lessons in leadership and management for anybody, not just military. So it was a lot of fun to do. The other one that isn't specifically Pacific is this about chaplains. There was a group of chaplains from Notre Dame that I found out about. I heard that there were a certain number in World War II, and I thought, I wonder if they did anything interesting. Well, when I dug into the archives and found out what they did, wow, I mean, they were all over. Normandy, one guy parachuted into Normandy on D-Day. Another survived the Bataan Death March, survived the Hell ships. I included 2 nuns, actually, from Notre Dame, who were in the Philippines when the war broke out and trapped for the war years in prison camp. And they took care of the people in camp just like a chaplain would. So I thought, I think they should be in there. So that's the other book that is not specifically the Pacific Theater. Now, my next book is already finished, Lost at Sea. It's about Eddie Rickenbacker, the famous aviator from World War I, the top American ace, also the famous car racer. He owned Indianapolis Speedway for a while. He was in charge of Eastern Airlines for a while. Big hero. In World War II, in 1942, the government asked him to fly across the Pacific to talk to General Douglas MacArthur, because MacArthur was making a lot of statements criticizing his military superiors. They're not doing it right, they're not sending me enough equipment, blah, blah, blah. And criticizing Roosevelt because MacArthur was thinking of running for president. Well, the government figured, we want to shut MacArthur up. Rickenbacker is such a known hero, let's send him across. He was a Medal of Honor recipient, just like MacArthur. MacArthur will listen to him. Well, flying across the Pacific in that kind of a bomber there, a B-17, with 7 other people, crew members, the plane got lost, ran out of gas, and they had to ditch. They spent 24 days on the ocean without food or water for much of it, trying to survive in the heat. This was right on, almost directly on the equator, just barely south of it. So hot. And the storms that might come up occasionally and everything. So this is the story of those 8 men focusing on Rickenbacker and one other guy especially. So that'll be out next spring. I've done some television work, and I haven't done anything new recently, but History Channel and all that, they're so great about rerunning things that you can probably find something here and there. That's the most recent, and that's about 5 years old, I would say, on the American Heroes Channel. A couple things, I'm sort of proud of this, and I hope you don't find it that I'm bragging, even though I guess I am, but I don't mean it to be that way. In my writing of naval history, the top award you can get is that one, the Samuel Eliot Morrison Award for Naval Literature. And for this book, I received that in 2018. There I am as part of my family there. Excuse me. It's, in my field, it's sort of like the Oscars without the money, fame, and glory. Remove that, it's just the same. Everything. But anyway, that was in New York City, and I wore a tux and all that. And I haven't worn a tux in decades, but there I was. The other thing is this book, Hell from the Heavens, is about a ship, the USS Laffey, L-A-F-F-E-Y. In April of 1945, that destroyer off the coast of Okinawa was attacked by 22 kamikazes in 80 minutes and survived. So it's a story of that ship and that crew. The ship is still afloat today, as I'll show you a little bit later. But anyway, Hollywood's making a movie out of it. Mel Gibson's directing, and Mark Wahlberg is going to star in it. They're working on it now. But now this is a picture of me in the backyard of Gibson's home. They wanted me to look over the screenplay and point out any mistakes that were in it, and there were some. I'm sitting at this long table, sort of like a king with his knights, a long manor table where a banquet is held. And I'm sitting there, and Gibson is at the top. Right behind him in the corner, leaning in the corner, was a battle axe, medieval battle axe. And I thought, okay, this guy wants me to criticize his screenplay. There's a battle axe behind Braveheart. What am I going to do? That kind of a thing. And but I did. I pointed out, and he was very fine with it. Well, that's Gibson there, and that's the girl who they have a 5-year-old son now together. At the time of the picture, she was 29, and Gibson wasn't. But we had a lot of fun out there. Now, to get to this talk of Air Group 88, I get often the questions asked, hello, I'm often asked, where do I come up with my ideas for a book? Excuse me. And they come from all over. Mostly I find it by digging into something and find something interesting that appeals.
Danny Vino.
Yeah, I was going to say, a high school classmate of mine. Sacred Heart Seminary here in Detroit. Danny, good to see you.
My wife Sue.
Hi, Sue.
I'm
great. Yeah, I look at him, whoa, I know that guy.
Sure.
Yeah, we went to Sacred Heart Seminary in the 60s. Well, 62, it was
Yeah,
in Europe.
right.
They used to have a high school at that time. Now it's just college, etc. And we've seen each other a little bit off and on at reunions, but it's so good to have you here. But in this one, I did a biography of Admiral Halsey about 10, 12 years ago. And he was the commander who ordered the 4 men out on that last mission. And he wrote in his autobiography, you should never forget those guys. They were the last guys to die, and we should not let them go unknown. And that just sort of registered with me to one day dig into it. Well, I did, and that produced the book that I'm talking about tonight. Now, if you read any of my books, I'm the type of writer, a historian, who I like to focus on people. Some historians will talk about Company A did this, or Company B did that. I like to say Charles Natter did this, and Dwight Hobbs did that. I like that connection. If you think about your favorite TV shows or movies or whatever, they're probably your favorite because you connect with something there. You like the main character or you don't like him. I mean, I love Silence of the Lambs, but I don't like that main character, Hannibal Lecter. But I was fascinated with him. And I try to bring the reader into it by telling the story through the experiences of the people who were in that story. So I rely a lot on letters, getting from family, etc., etc. Now there are 4 men. These 2 I won't be focusing on tonight. Of the 4, I could never track down any family of Lieutenant Harrison's. I mean, there was none. I checked the old roster lists and the survivors list of, you know, the reunions and the survivors associations of the air group. Couldn't find anything. Had to deal with secondary material and official action reports. I found a little bit on Saloff, but not as much. So I relied on the other 2. Dwight Hobbs, called Billy Hobbs, from Kokomo, Indiana. It's about in the middle of the state of Indiana. He loved flying from the time he was a little kid. Remember, I told you I was hooked the first time in 4th grade. I read my first history book. That was him with air. There was a small airfield near his farm home in Kokomo. He'd go out there all the time just to watch. He loved flying. The other one, Eugene Vandenberg, opposite of Billy, quiet and studious. He wasn't there because he loved flying. Now, I included Vandenberg. I was happy to because this is where he grew up in Detroit. Monica Street in Detroit. Excuse me. Here we are. There's his home. According to the Google map, 18.1 miles away. You know, a real local boy for sure. His dad owned a furniture store that was right about there. There's Coble. His furniture store was in downtown Detroit. So I was glad I could include someone local like that in the story. Now, unlike Billy, who just wanted to fly, he loved the adventure, Eugene was a serious student at the University of Michigan. He was concerned with the social problems of the day. He wrote a story called Private Party about a lynching in Georgia of a black man accused of raping a white woman. That's not typical for a college student, but he was not a typical college student. Very serious about the daily issues. While Billy saw the war as an opportunity to fly, Eugene saw it as his duty to combat evil. So 2 opposite personalities there. Now on April 15th, 1944, the air group in which they flew was formed. That was also Billy Hobbs' birthday, August 15th. He was 22. A year later, on August 15th, he would turn 23 and die. The last day of the war. It was the last day of combat in the Pacific. Now, their squadron and unit history said that they were, for the most part, kids jerked right out of high school. Not old enough to vote, yet old enough to fly a plane right into the heart of the Japanese Empire. Young kids. There's a picture of them in the ready room. They loved, both Billy and Eugene Vandenberg loved the training part. They were eager to get to war, especially Billy. He couldn't wait. I want to match my skills with those of the Japanese pilots and that kind of thing. They couldn't wait. It was, at this stage, I won't call it a game to them, but they used words that indicated it was sort of like that. You know, I had a lot of fun this morning on a strike we had. That was in training, not an actual warship. We went out and strafed and bombed the target. We really had some dogfight. Billy was adventurous in the air, adventurous on the ground. He loved not just flying with females. He played the whole court, that's for sure. Went out to the Colonial Club with Mary last night. He wrote in his diary. His family gave me his diary to copy. Nice time. Did okay. Met a girl who was quite fast. Must have been a track star. Something like that. Anyway, he enjoyed females. When I read his diary, I was touched by the back part of it, the 30 pages plus, that listed girls' names, addresses that he had seen. Miss Arlene Rogers, Livermore, California. Now, D.C. Ramsey, I don't know if that's a guy or a girl, but Catherine Reed, Cleveland Heights, Illinois. Lenora Roberts, Chicago, Illinois. Here's a girl from Minot, North Dakota. I mean, he was all over the place, apparently, but he enjoyed himself. He just liked to have fun. Whereas Eugene, the serious one, nah, one's fine for me. And there's his one right there. Sonia Levine from New York City that he met during training when they were in New England, flying off of carriers in training. Sonia was attracted to him because of his mind and his willingness to use it to try and solve social problems. She thought a lot of guys were too flighty, unlike all of us who would never be called that way. But she just thought that guys that say they're too flighty. So they became engaged. Billy was out still having his fun, and Eugene and Sonia are engaged. But Vandenberg could have fun, even though he didn't maybe mean it. He wrote his mom about when they're practicing the aerial gunnery in the sky, a plane is tugging along a sleeve, like a long banner, and the other pilots fly by, the other aviators, and shoot at that sleeve, a target practice. Everything is fine here. I got some hits in gunnery, so I'm no longer a virgin. And then real quick he said, come on, no, in gunnery I'm talking about, in gunnery, nothing else. So, don't read anything into it. I'm just talking about I am now someone who can hit a target. Well, they went to Hawaii for further training, but yet there was still a war to be considered. Everyone wanted to get started. They had to get out to the action. Before Billy left Kokomo, his mom, Hattie, took off her wedding ring and gave it to him. Put it on a chain with your dog tags. I wanted to give him something to keep him safe. So he always wore that. His dog tags and his mom's wedding ring was right there with him. Zelda, that's Vandenberg, Eugene's mom. I can hardly think of Eugene leaving. Let us hope and pray that God will bring him back safe and very soon. See, another thing I try to do in my books is to bring a little light, and this one a little bit more than just a little, on the family's background. While their sons are obviously facing horrors in combat, what was mom thinking? What were they reading? What were they doing? That kind of stuff. And so I bring some of that in this book, obviously. Fortunately, the family of these two had all these letters, much, much more that they gave me access to. Well, they're out to the combat zone. And boy, as far as Billy Hobbs was concerned, they struck gold. They were assigned to the USS Yorktown. They joined in June of 1945. Now, the war ended in August of 45, so they weren't over there a long, long time. But air groups generally were rotated quickly anyway, but they were only there for a couple months. Yorktown has such a great record, that's what made Billy happy. They had a presidential unit citation, which is given to a unit that performs above and beyond the call of duty. Hollywood produced an Oscar-winning documentary about the ship Yorktown. There you see it right there, the poster. Billy was sure, man, we're going to see action with this aircraft carrier. It's in all kinds of action and has been throughout the whole war. Then they learned who's in charge of the task force. Admiral Halsey. Bull Halsey, the press labeled him. He was, I don't know who to compare him to today. Brave beyond measure. Pardon? Schwarzkopf, that's a good one. Yeah. Yeah, he was aggressive. He wanted to go after everyone all the time as far as in combat. A great leader in many ways. And they learned that he's going to be our leader. We're going to see some action. He steamed into Pearl Harbor just after the battle. He was at sea, fortunately, because it meant his carrier was not sunk during that action. So that was actually a good move, or a good fortune kind of event. He steamed in right after the action. He said, before we're through with them, the Japanese language will be spoken only in hell. The American public loved that because they were so shocked, obviously, with Pearl Harbor. What happened? I thought we had a good military. Where are our guys? What's going on? And Halsey comes from, man, we're going to get them before we're through with them. Their language only in hell kind of thing. He would not be considered today politically appropriate by anybody. Far right, far left, I don't care who today. He would take it to another measure with some of the things he said, much worse than this. But the public loved it in 1940s. Then he also transported the Doolittle Raiders on his carrier Hornet to the launching point in the Pacific, and then Jimmy Doolittle and his bombers bombed Tokyo in 1942. Another thing that the public loved. He was commander in the South Pacific for a time, and he had that big sign put up. Admiral Halsey says, kill Japs, kill Japs, kill more Japs. Okay. He sure let you know where he stood. But his problem was, first of all, in 1942, he missed the two big aircraft carrier battles in the Pacific, the Battle of the Coral Sea and the Battle of Midway. Midway's had a couple movies made on it, Coral Sea not as much, but he missed them both. He was too far away to participate in the Battle of the Coral Sea, and for Midway, he came down with a severe affliction, skin disease, and itching all over, and so he was replaced with Admiral Raymond Spruance. And it killed him not to participate, because that's what he so badly wanted, a carrier battle. Then he committed 3 blunders. At the Battle of Leyte Gulf in the Philippines in October of 44, just about right now, October 25th, he was supposed to guard a strait, a narrow body of water in the Philippines called the San Bernardino Strait. His job was to stop a Japanese task force if it came barreling through and prevent it from turning south and attacking General Douglas MacArthur's forces that were landing in the Philippines. Well, he took off from that post, chasing after what he thought were enemy carriers, but they were a decoy. The Japanese came through, and only by a miracle were they stopped. A miracle by a small unit called Taffy 3. Then he led his fleet into 2 different typhoons, one in December of 44 and another in June of 45. Normally, any one of those 3 would have got him sacked, but the public so wanted it. He avoided being replaced because of the public, the fame that he had over what he had done earlier. But he knew his reputation was harmed, So he was going to use Air Group 88, the one with Billy Hobbs and Eugene Vandenberg in it, to restore his reputation. Now, a little aside on Halsey, he's one of my heroes. I read his autobiography when I was in college, and I was fascinated with the guy. For this book, I'm telling the story of Air Group 88. They don't like him at all. And so I had to tell it from their point of view, and I had to be fair. He did make these mistakes. And you know, I wrote a chapter in a book about 20 years ago that laid all this out. But he's going to look like maybe a villain in my book in some ways. He really was not a villain. He was a great hero in the first 2 years of the war, and then sort of tapered off after that. Men on the Yorktown were not as excited to have Halsey in charge because of all of what I just had gone through explaining to you. One of them wrote this poem, bold as name, bold as nature, bold as talk will always be. But for me and many like him, he's a perfect SOB. Typhoons never worry this guy. Will they come from north or south? Typhoons? He has one every time he opens his big mouth. Pretty hard, huh? He has uttered one desire, to mount Hirohito's steed. He bragged that he was going to go into Tokyo and ride Emperor Hirohito's white horse. And the peace parade in Nippon, this bold warrior wants to lead. There he is. Well, he should be a mighty rider, for, you know, I tell you from my heart, I consider him part equine. And I think you know which part. Now again, that's how the crew of the Yorktown sort of look at him, not the air crew. An aircraft carrier has two sections, divisions, units, whatever. The ship's company, which is the crew that's always with an aircraft carrier, taking care of it, etc. And the air group, those are the guys that flew the planes. The air group would change every 5-6 months. The ship's company was always there. That's why these guys were a little more quick to be tired of him than Billy Hobbs. Well, Hobbs on July 1st to leave for the Philippines, and he wrote, hey, we're getting closer, we're all very anxious to get into the war. And there he is at war. Well, that's a map showing all the air group operations in 42 missions over 46 days. Excuse me, from the north to the south, some up here, some down here, all kinds of different things happen. Billy and Eugene were involved in a number of these, but not every one. It depended on whose turn was it, etc., etc. They were due to go out on July 10th for their first strike. The day before that mission, Billy wrote in his diary, the day before strike day, we are all very eager to get at something. That strike day,